Session today. Again, this is kind of our agenda for today, and we're going to talk a little bit about the closedown steps and what you need to do to prepare for submission. We're going to touch on data cleanup and transfers and point of authority. We're also going to talk a little bit about the reporting requirements, as well as go over the supports and the timeline, our feedback survey, and certainly we want to take some time to answer questions if time allows. What we've done is we've organized this into kind of three simple ways of thinking about closing down this particular spring window. The first is understanding that all assessment data must be entered by May 14th, by 11:59 p.m. on May 14th. So it's really important that if you're not seeing that information, and again, we will go over how you can tell if the information's been submitted and been completed. But if you're not seeing that information, it's really important for you to reach out to those buildings, to those principals, and to those teachers to let them know that May 14th is right around the corner. So the second piece of that is cleaning up the data. So once that data comes in, there's an opportunity for you to spend some time working on cleaning up that data. And again, that's looking at the student files and teacher information, enrollments, all of those things to make sure that those pieces are in order prior to submission. If there are transfers that are needed, data managers need to be responsible and have all of that taken care of. You'll have until May 21st to do all of this data cleanup here. But we're looking at taking care of transfers, and we'll talk about that in detail. We're going to look at student scores and data, talk about the reports, how you find this information and find out where this information is to know if it's complete or not. We're going to talk a little bit about teacher status and whether it's active or inactive. And that's really connected to whether you're going to see student scores or not, and the enrollments to see if students are linked with teachers. And then we're going to talk about the current data collection and the token for that, which is listed there, Spring 21 ELA, as well as the point of authority. That's what POA is here. We're going to look at the system where all of these things occur and where you will be working as a data manager in the system. You see their transfers on the left and the navigation, and all of those areas that are highlighted are areas that you'll be functioning in and working with as we go through this close down process. So there are really two types of transfers: internal and external. Internal transfers, any student uploaded with a new student ID is going to trigger a transfer internally. It's important that those transfers be approved or denied depending upon the status, and that in the case of enrollment issues, that those are resolved. You may need to remove a student from the original teacher. So if a student goes from one building to another building, it may be necessary for you to remove that student from that previous teacher, the original teacher, so that the other teacher has access to those student scores. And again, internal transfers do not appear in the KReady system transaction history. So external transfers are going to be triggered when a student with the same student ID is loaded into the system. So one student from an outside district that is loaded, that's going to trigger a transfer. You do have access to seeing this in the KReady system. You can select the transfers area tab and then look for and approve or decline the requests that come in. Also, make sure you're using that transfers area to monitor any requests that might come into you. So there may be a student that's transferred out of your district into another district, and we want you to also make sure that you're monitoring so that you can approve any requests that may come into you. Student data may be collected while a request is pending. This is really important. Some teachers are wondering, if I enter scores for this student, even though if the transfer hasn't been approved, what happens? Well, those scores can still be collected and entered into the system in pending mode until it's approved or declined. The POA, however, will remain with the original district until the transfer is approved. So it's really important that as a data manager, you're communicating with the other data managers. Scores will be transferred once the approval occurs and that the correct data token is assigned to the student. So here you see the tab that says requests from others. So these would be transfers that they have received, new students they have received, and they're sending a request to your district to say, we have one of your students, will you approve this transfer? The same is true for requests that occur from you to them. So any request that you have pending, that's what the second tab will show. And then the actual transaction history between the two districts will occur in the transfer history. And so now we're going to talk about preparing and what you need to do to prepare as we move forward. A few other steps in that process, dealing with student data, taking a look at completed or missing information on a student score, the student scores. Talk about the teacher status, active versus inactive, and when that's important. Again, looking at the enrollments, making sure that students and teachers are linked and that they're linked with that enrollment token. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the point of authority and making sure that that is assigned so that those scores are with the correct districts.
As you guys can see on the screen there are the 3 different reports that you can pull as a data manager. The ELA SKB Ratings Report, this particular report is going to show what has been entered rating-wise for each of the students. And this is going to be available both during and after the collection window. The second one there for the Learning Progression Report. The report is actually going to be available to data managers after the window closes, which is actually after the data cleanup will be available to data managers on May 24th. And this report is what you are going to submit for EMIS or EAS. And again, that particular report is not going to be available until after the window closes and on May 24th. And the last report there is the data downloads. And this particular report shows just a lot of information when it comes to what has been entered in the KReady system. So it's more of a managerial, to see what has been loaded for the teachers, for your students and enrollment. So we're going to go through those. And that data downloads report, that's, again, it's available during and after the collection window. All right, so when you sign in, you've got all of the information here on the left-hand side. We're going to go to reports. The first one I want to show you is that data downloads report, because like Ed stated, we want to make sure that the students, the teachers, everybody is attached, active or inactive for teachers. Same with students. So when you select reports, select the drop-down arrow, and you want to go down to the bottom where it says System Reports, Data Downloads. There are 3 different types of reports you can pull. Now I want to show you just how to pull this teacher report because like Ed stated, you can see what your teacher status is, whether you want to pull all active, all inactive, or just all of them. And you would select your parameters here, how you want to, what their role is, the data collection. And then you can do it for your district, your entire district. So if you have multiple preschools, you would, 3 of those, it would pull all 3 of those schools. If you're looking for just a specific location, you can do just that. And you can select the location or the district. The one that I really want to show you actually is going to be this enrollment file. And this, like Ed stated, is that point of authority that you want to make sure you have for your students. So again, do the enrollments, do your data collection as the spring. I'm just going to do it for the whole district. And you can see your report has been requested here at the top. It's going to come out as export enrollments. Select download. Once that downloads, open that up. This gives you your students' names, who they're attached to, what the teacher is, and are they attached to that spring data collection? Are they active? And then the most important thing is that point of authority. So if you did a transfer for a student and it was never accepted, you're going to see this particular student here, I don't have the point of authority. So it's not going to pull in the report. So again, this just kind of gives you a little more detail for the students and the enrollment purposes. The next report I'm going to show you is going to be the SKB Ratings Report. And you'll see right underneath ELA Reports, ELA SKB Rating Report. And again, remember this, you can pull during and after. Select your data collection, and you will see this filter by point of authority. Now, it's automatically checked. And what that means is when you pull the report, only students whose point of authority is with your district will show on this report. If you uncheck it, then the data manager will see all students who have been loaded for the district, regardless of their point of authority. So this option is more for situations where students are reported by two organizations. Well, we're going to keep this check, and we're going to check the start date. And I always go back to the start of the actual assessment. And then for now, I'm just picking today's date. You can select the location and do it by location. You can do it by district, or you can do it by region. And region is more for data managers who have multiple districts. I'm going to do the district. You can see it's been requested, and it's going to come up as SKB Rating Report. Once that downloads, open that up, and you're going to see the list of all of your students, who they're attached to, the teachers, and then all the SKBs. So this lists all of the 72 SKBs for the early learning assessment. And what you see is the scores that have been entered. So for instance, these particular students that are attached to Carissa, Iron Man, Steve Rogers, Thor, there's not a lot of scores entered for these students. So as a data manager, what I'm going to want to do is get a hold of that teacher, make sure this is all done. So that is the SKB, and that kind of helps you keep track of what's going on with your students, what scores have been entered. And the last report that you would pull would be that learning progression report. You can uncheck or check the box of filter by point of authority and select your data collection. As you can see, you're not going to see the spring until that learning progression report is available. And that is what you are going to give to EMIS and EAS.
And so it's sort of been the same for many years, although we did have a little change this year with the 2020-21, moving from the 10 required learning progressions to the 10 skills, knowledge, and behaviors. So it's the same thing for this spring. We have reporting requirements for our ODE and our ODJFS licensed programs, and that is for the children who are funded with the ECE grant or children receiving preschool special education services. They must have those data points for those 10 skills, knowledges, and behaviors reported. Those scores come from either your KReady system or the bridge form, which we hope that most of you are using the KReady system. I think a lot of programs are now, and if you are still getting caught up and learning about it, that's what the help desk is here for. And but for EMIS and EAS, those are the two reporting systems that you would be sending your scores through. If you're not sure which system you put your scores in, we can help you figure that out. But they also, EMIS and EAS, have different deadlines. So then that's on another screen here. But it's really just important to remember that your ECE funded children and your children receiving PSE services must have scores for those 10 skills, knowledges, and behaviors, and you report those through EMIS or EAS. Some deadlines, which you've heard a little bit in this webinar already, but we always like to reiterate them. So May 14th at 11:59 p.m., that is the deadline for teachers to have entered the assessment data for the spring data collection. And on May 15th, unfortunately, teachers will not be able to go in and enter any data. So over the next 11 days, let's make sure we're supporting our teachers with reviewing any observations that they've completed or their curriculum assessments that they've done, and translating that into the data that they have to enter into KReady. Now, between May 14th and May 21, data managers can go into the system and do some cleanup. We call that the cleanup window. That's when you can approve transfers, clean up that student demographic data if it needs to be cleaned up, if you need to enter something specific about the child that you might not have entered. when you first loaded the student, you can do that cleanup. A couple days after that cleanup on May 24th, we'll have the learning progression score reports available for download in that KReady system. And that's what the data manager will do. They'll go in to their KReady account, they'll go into that reports section, and they can download that learning progression score report. That is the report that gets sent in through EMIS or EAS. As I mentioned, EMIS and EAS have different deadlines. These calendar dates can change at any time, especially for EMIS. So you always want to, be in communication with your EMIS coordinator. Sometimes you are the EMIS coordinator, but if not, please communicate with your EMIS coordinator. If they're asking for the data, earlier than it needs to be available, just remind EMIS coordinators the data will be available May 24th. And for EMIS, your spring results have to be into EMIS by August 27th. So that gives you some time, but we encourage you to get that done as soon as possible so that you can check for any issues and do any cleanup that you need to. EAS must be entered by June 30th, and there's a different grantee manual that has some information about that if you need that. Let's talk briefly about each of those reporting tools and those methods. If you're using the bridge form, that is just an Excel document that's posted on our webpage. So you would download that, and you would need to download a new form. Don't use the same one from the fall because you don't want to override what you did then. Hopefully you saved your fall scores and now you have a new form for the spring scores. You will have to use some local communication methods to make sure that that data is accurate prior to handing it off to the EMIS coordinator or to whoever puts the data into EAS. And again, this document is on our ELA for Administrators webpage. And there's a directions page. That's what you see here. And then there's a tab for teachers to enter the scores. And there's a tab that translates over for the EAS or the EMIS data manager. When you're using the KReady system, you have a lot more functionality. And this is the most reliable way to verify that the students have complete scores. You would look at that SKB report, and data managers and administrators can run those reports and identify whether all students have scores entered for the SKBs. And just as a reminder, each student receiving PSE services or an ECE funded child, they must have ratings for those 10 SKBs. Earlier in the webinar, though, I did see that 63% of you are using it as your comprehensive. So don't be surprised if you have many more students and many more data points, which is great, but you only have to report what comes out on that learning progression report for your ECE and PSE funded. You can report all of your children. We don't care if you report all of your children, but you would not be reporting all of the scores. That's why you need to use the learning progression score report. Okay, but what happens if a learning progression score is an N? So if you happen to see any N scores in your reports, this means that either the teacher was not able to determine a score for a child on one of those skills, knowledges, or behaviors, or perhaps the child has not yet met the highest level indicator that is available on the rubric. So a teacher might enter N or NE. When it comes out in the report, it will show an N. And if you have any of these scores as an N, you cannot put an N in EMIS or EAS. When you submit assessment data to EMIS or EAS, anytime there is an N rating, you will have to enter a reason code. Now, there is a list of allowable reason codes and an explanation of what those mean. They are found in our EMIS manual. And so as you are preparing your files to go into either EMIS or EAS, you might have to have some conversation or a communication method with the teachers as to why there are some N scores. There is nothing in the bridge form or in KReady that provides an option to record the reason code. And we don't want you to alter those documents to include anything like that. So what you must do is have an internal process and know what you're going to put in, what reason code are you going to put in anytime you see an N score. And let's see here. I know we have a chat and we have some links there. Maybe if Megan is able to, she can put a link to that EMIS manual where the reason codes are.
Working on it right now, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Megan. You also can only put one reason code per N rating, but it's okay if it's the same reason code, and it might be, but you might have a different reason code depending on the student and the situation. And so that's why you will want to consult that EMIS manual. If you have any questions about that, you can always reach out to our team, and we're happy to help you think through that. If you have missing scores, your teacher should only put an N or NE if they have tried to observe or interacted with the child and they have some data that verifies that it's it's an N, it's not yet evident or it's not scorable. But if the child maybe missed some school or missed some opportunity and the teacher doesn't have assessment data to provide a rating, the teacher should just leave that item blank, leave that SKB blank, and then that would still come up as a missing score or a score of 0 on the bridge form. Either way, you still have to put in a reason code. So whether you have an N rating or a missing rating, in EMIS, you will have to enter **** and then a reason code for that score not reported. There is one reason code, F as in Frank, and we encourage you to only use that option if no other valid reason code applies.
We just want to reinforce where you can go to get resources and additional information. Again, with regards to policy, guidelines, any kind of background and context, all of those pieces you'll be able to find on the Ohio Department of Education's website under Early Learning. So if you go to the main page and you click on topics and you scroll down to early learning, it'll bring you to this page and you'll be able to get information on the early learning assessment and specific information for assessment data managers. If you need additional support from a technical perspective, reach out to the help desk. Here's the information, ohio-k12.help. The phone number, if you need phone support, is 844-K12-OHIO or 844-512-6446. You can find how-to videos on our website, additional support resources, again, from a technical perspective, and training opportunities much like this, webinars and meetings and things of that nature that we think will benefit you and are helpful to you in your role as the assessment data manager. We want to make sure that you are aware that the data collection window closes, so please be reaching out to your teachers and administrators so that those scores can be collected. You have until May 21 to do the data cleanup. And then on May 24th, it's expected that the learning progression scores will be available for you to submit to EMIS or EAS.
Responding to the question about using the F as a reason code, F is a reason code. Question from a participant here about a student who has not attended. Now, if a child is not attending school, I believe there are going to be some other issues there regarding attendance and probably some other factors there. So we would ask that you reach out to us.
And again, it's the point of authority. If it says yes, when you're pulling like the enrollment file through the data downloads, you want that point of authority to say yes. But if you're sharing it, it's okay that the ESC, let's say, has the point of authority and it's no longer with your district. Another attendee asked, so do I delete from the report? The report is just showing you what is in the KReady system. You're not deleting anything off that report. I mean, it is your report, and it is for your district, but there's really no reason to delete anything out of any of the reports that you pull. The question is regarding POA, some of them are coming up as orange and show both ESC and home district. Only one can have the point of authority. Again, students can be shared by two organizations. Like I said, pull that data downloads report and looking at that enrollment data downloads, and you will see exactly what students you have the point of authority for. If it is shared by two districts, again, if the ESC did second, or if you did second uploading the student, it triggers a transfer request. And the district who has the student, or the person who has a student, they can either accept or deny. If they deny the transfer, you still have the point of authority, but the ESC would be able to see, and it's kind of sharing that student.
It's important to remember that in ELA that you are able to share students between organizations, understanding that the ESC and the home district are sharing a student. Also remember this, last in wins. So unless that point of authority is designated, if it's supposed to be with the home district and it's designated as such, it's important to remember that the last entity to enter the scores, that's the scores that would be counted towards the students' rating.